Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is Gina from McGuire. So today I am revisiting one of my old favorite techniques that results in shimmer backgrounds with lots of layered details. The nice thing about this technique is it involves a very inexpensive product that many of us already have, and then you can team it up with any stencils or background stamps or regular stamps that you have. I'll show you a few variations, and I'll start out first by using layering stencils and stamps together. Then we'll do a couple really simple quick cards that just involve stamps, and then we'll finish off the video with a bonus card. So I'm hoping that by demonstrating this in many ways, you can think about what you have on hand to use with the technique. Now, most of my video focuses on the new Gina K Designs A Little Hello kit. This is such a great kit. It has 3 layering stencils, and then this stamp set that coordinates with it. You can stamp those floral details onto your background after you've done the stenciling, and then you also have many sentiments on here. Included in the kit is also a hello die that is great, along with the shadow die to go with it, and then dies that will cut out the flowers that you create with the stencils. So you can mix and match these and get a lot of different looks. You could create a background, or you could ink the background up and die cut out flowers and leaves using the dies and use them individually. Lots of ways to use it. We're mostly going to use it for backgrounds today. Now, the product I'll be using today to create this shimmer technique is Ranger Perfect Pearl Pigment Powders. Any mica powder or pigment powder should work. This is my favorite. I've had these for many years. You can see different labels that they have changed over the years. It's a great product that is inexpensive, a little goes a long way, and there are many techniques that you can do. I will link to a couple other videos using Perfect Pearls at the end of this video for you to check out. I will talk more about this shimmery product as we create these cards. All right, so let's start by creating a bunch of backgrounds using that stencil layering set. I have my Waffle Flower Water Media Mat. I like doing stenciling on this because it has a little corner that you can put your paper and your stencils in, which allows you to line up your stencils each time in the same place. So I put this onto a dark piece of cardstock. This is a dark gray. And I am going to press over this stencil very generously with VersaMark Ink. I'm using a Tim Holtz blending tool with one of the domed foams on it, but any kind of foam inking tool would work great here. I wouldn't recommend a brush for this. You really want to get as much of this pigment ink, this clear pigment ink, into the openings. Again, this is VersaMark Ink, just clear and sticky. So all we're doing is making sticky areas where there is an opening with the stencils. As for what color cardstock you can use any. You'll see me use a few different ones, but I do recommend dark cardstock for this technique. Okay, so now I'm going to remove that stencil, and on this layer, I am adding silver embossing powder. We'll do each layer a little bit different, but this one I'm doing embossing. This is the detail of the leaves and the center of the flowers, and I thought those would be fun with the silver. Now, while I have these products out, the stencil, the inking tool, and everything, I'm doing the same process on multiple colors of cardstock, so that when I am done going through the process, I'll end up with many backgrounds. And each of the backgrounds I use to create 2 cards. So all of these here are just silver heat embossed using the first layer of that layering stencil set. You could just stamp this if you prefer, totally up to you. All right, now I'm coming in with the second stencil. It really doesn't matter what order you do the stencils. This is just what worked well for the particular technique I'm doing. All right, so I'm lining up the next stencil, and you can see my silver embossings underneath there. And this time, I'm also pressing VersaMark ink over the openings. All we're doing is putting that sticky ink into the openings. Some of it will be on top of the silver heat embossing that's exposed. That's okay. It doesn't matter at all. You just really want to work in as much ink as you can, so you can see how I'm kind of pressing and twisting my inking tool. Okay, now it's time to do the Perfect Pearl Pigment Powder. This is one of the green colors, and I'm lightly dabbing into the little jar a dry brush. This is the brush meant for Perfect Pearls, but any brush would work. And I'm applying this over the sticky ink that we just put through the stencil. What happens is this super fine shimmery powder will stick to that sticky ink, leaving behind a shine. It even goes on top of the heat embossing that we've already done. It's fine to layer that up. Now you'll see there's some extra pigment powder there. Don't worry about it. I'm going to come back and clean that all up at one time. But while I have the stencil and VersaMark ink and inking tool out, I'll go ahead and do this layer and the perfect pearls on each of my colored cardstocks. You could do just one through the process, but I like to make many at a time. Once again, I'll add the green pigment powder to that exposed VersaMark ink that we just added. The VersaMark ink will grab a hold of the pigment powder and give us shimmery leaves. And I'll do this to all of our backgrounds. Now, if you find that you get a little bit of VersaMark ink where you don't want it when you're doing the stenciling and some pigment powder sticks where you don't want it, all you have to do is take an eraser to erase it. I like to use my electric eraser, the Creative Detailer, to do that, but a regular eraser will help to remove it. After I've kind of cleaned it up, I just like to take a dry cloth and very lightly brush over the background once or twice, just to remove the excess powder from the background. But don't do that too generously because you might wipe away some of the shimmer from the leaves, which we don't want to do. So again, just a dry cloth, quick once or twice over it, and we're ready to go to the next step. I will talk about how to make sure your pigment powders stay put in the long run a little bit later in this video. Look how cool the pigment powder looks on black cardstock. It definitely is most effective. This technique is most effective the darker your cardstock is. On lighter cardstock, it doesn't show up as much unless you tilt it in the light. Okay, now I have my final stencil that I'm adding on top, and this will do all of the flowers and dots. So once again, I'm using my inking tool and my VersaMark ink to add the VersaMark ink into all of the openings of the stencil. I'm really pressing and kind of rotating it to make sure it gets into all the nooks and crannies. The more VersaMark ink you put down, the more perfect pearl you'll be able to hold on your background and the more shimmer you will have. Okay, so once I've covered that, I can remove the stencil, and now is the fun part. I'm going to add multiple colors to these flowers. Now this time I wanted a smaller brush to be able to apply colors to just different areas of exposed VersaMark ink. So such as here, I see those little VersaMark ink dots. I wanted to make those gold. So I'm using my Altenew blending brushes. These are mini blending brushes, and there are 3, I think, in a pack, a small, medium, and large. The large is the one I'm using here. This allows me to get into tight spaces. You could use regular paint brushes for this, but I like the short bristles on this. Really makes it easy to apply your pigment powder exactly where you want it. I then can clean these brushes when I'm done and use them however else I want to, like with inks and such. So if you haven't seen these brushes, I really think they're handy and they're great for perfect pearl. I plan to keep 3 of these in with my perfect pearls so that when I want to use them, I have them ready to go. Okay, so I did different ones here. I did gold, I added some purple, and here I'm adding like a bronze poppy color. Now you'll see it looks a little dusty here. You just want to use your brush to knock off as much excess as you can. And then you can take your dry cloth and brush once or twice very lightly over it to really clean it up. Again, don't press firmly with the cloth as it might leave a mark on your shimmer. And check that out, the beautiful different colors, especially when you tilt it in the light. It's one of those that you really need to see in person to see how beautiful that shimmer is. Let's do another background. This one's the black, which is definitely the most intense. I already did the gold powder on the VersaMark dots. Now I'm adding different colors of the pigment powder to the flowers. So you can do a multicolored background. You could do all one color, whatever you want. But by using small brushes, you can get different colors into different areas. So on this one, I'm going to have multiple colors of flowers. Again, this is the black background. This will show the colorful perfect pearls more than any of the colors because it's the darkest option. Now these pigment powders come in many different colors, especially the Ranger Perfect Pearls. I prefer the brighter colors and the white and the gold. Those are the ones I use the most and that I use today. Now notice I went a little overboard on the pigment powder here. A little goes a long way, so I didn't need to use as much as I did here. So there's a lot on my work surface. What I could do is spray water onto the work surface to mix in with the perfect pearl and then paint a background with it or create like an ink smush background. But today I'm just focusing on the background, so I'll just wipe that up. A little goes a long way with perfect pearls, and that little jar will last you a long time. I've never had to replenish. So let's take a look at the completed backgrounds that I have. I've added perfect pearls to all of them and trimmed them down. You can see the different results we get. I used the same silver embossing at the beginning, and I used different colors of cardstock and different perfect pearls on it. And you get really unique results. This one's my favorite. I used white perfect pearls, green, and gold. Here you can see how you can use darker perfect pearls on a lighter cardstock to help it show up a little bit more. But it really just is something you want to play around with. But if you just get a basic white and gold, you can do a lot of really cool shimmer backgrounds with that. All right, we're not done with these backgrounds though. I want to add something to it that really steps it up and is a fun technique to do. And you'll see another version of this technique in a simple way later in this video. But see how there is text writing on the flowers? That's what we're going to do here using a lifting technique. I have my Misty stamping tool, and inside of it is a clear sticky mat that I've cut to fit. That just helps hold it in place, but you could use tape or temporary adhesive. I also have the Simon Says Stamp Friendship Text Background Stamp. I'm laying one of my perfect pearl backgrounds onto it, then I'll close the Misty upside down, and that just makes sure I get it centered and straight. The sticky mat is holding that cardstock there. Now I'm inking up my stamp with VersaMark Ink, nothing else, just VersaMark Ink, and I'll press that background stamp firmly over our perfect pearl background. And check it out, what happens is the VersaMark ink on the stamp lifts and pulls away some of the perfect pearl from our background. So it leaves behind that text look. To intensify that look, I'm repeating the process, but I'm being sure to clean off my stamp completely. I don't want to transfer any of the perfect pearl that we lifted off of our background onto my VersaMark ink pad. So I just cleaned off the stamp, putting fresh VersaMark ink onto the background stamp, and now stamping it again in the same place on the background. And when I'm done, check it out. I'll have this black text that runs through those perfect pearl flowers. Really cool. If you don't have a text background, you could also stamp with maybe a stripe or a little dot stamp. Now this lifting technique definitely works best for your darker cardstocks, so that when you lift the perfect pearl, you have that contrast showing of the darker cardstock behind. So I did that with a few of my cards. You can see here is the dark green where we lifted off the text from the flowers. However, on some of the other lighter colored backgrounds, I wanted to do something different. So we're not doing lift, but I am adding a little bit of layering. So for example, on this lighter blue background, instead of trying to lift some of the perfect pearl, which I didn't think would be visible, I'm using Gina K Barely There Amalgam ink. This is a light warm gray ink, and I'll actually stamp it 2 or 3 times. But this is just adding text over the background, not really doing much lifting because this is not a sticky ink that would pull the perfect pearl away. This is just adding layering. I think it's fun to layer up your stencils and your background stamps. Now on this particular one, I used white pigment ink instead. This will end up creating a text that's a little more vibrant against the blue background. So I have my same setup as before, but this time I'm using white pigment ink. Now this white pigment ink is a little sticky, so it will lift a little bit, but you really won't see it because it's leaving behind the white ink. So this is just putting a white ink over the whole background, which again, I think is just a fun way to add interest. Now on all of these examples, I didn't use the coordinating stamp set from the kit, but remember how I showed you it has these details to add to the flowers? I actually only used these details on a couple of my backgrounds. I used it on the purple here, which I've already done the lifting technique on. You can see the text back there. Now I'm stamping on top of the perfect pearls with a purple dye ink to add those details to the center of the flowers. So you can really do some fun layering with your heat embossing, your perfect pearls, and your stamping. I feel like this is a great way to give layered stencils and stamps a new look. You'll see what this looks like with just white paper and bright ink later in this video. Completely different look. I also used this flower detail stamp on this background, stamping it with white pigment ink. Okay, so now we have these shimmery backgrounds that are beautiful and we can create simple cards from them. However, I do like to spray these with a fixative before I do anything else because I don't want those perfect pearls to rub off. You could do a light mist of water to help hold the perfect pearls in place. They have a built-in binder that would allow you to do that. But I always think it's best to just go ahead and take it outside, do a quick spritz with a fixative. This is the one that I use. And then we don't have to worry about the shimmer rubbing off. I use this fixative for other projects too, so it's a staple in my craft room. After spraying all of the backgrounds with the fixative and giving it a bit of time to dry, we can now create our cards. I'm keeping them very simple since the background has a lot to offer. However, I wanted to show you some tips along the way and ways to stretch these backgrounds to make multiple cards. Notice on this card that the hello is a purple shimmer that matches nicely with the purple shimmer flowers in the background. This is a fun way to use your perfect pearls to create shimmer die cuts, and it's easy to do. So I have a hello die cut using the hello die from the kit I showed you earlier. I die cut it from black cardstock, and I'm pressing my VersaMark ink over it, covering it with a thin layer. I then will add perfect pearl to this entire die cut, and I'm using the same purple perfect pearl that I used on the background, so it'll be a nice match. I do recommend starting with a dark cardstock here, as always, because it allows this shimmer to shine more. So by using black cardstock, we'll get a really true bright purple shimmer. Once I'm done, I just brush off the excess, and then I take it out and give it a little spray with a fixative to be sure it stays put. You could do multiple die cuts at once and do a really shimmery die cut card. Lots of ways you can use this technique. You could even use the lift technique on your die cuts. Okay, so we have all of the pieces ready for this first card. Now it's time to assemble it. Notice that the purple background there is cut to a rectangle, and there's a very fine black mat behind it. I like to do this using the Gina K Master Layouts 1 die set. That's the one over on the left. You'll see there are 2 large rectangle dies in that set. One is slightly smaller than the other, so you can die cut a rectangle and a fine mat to go with it. So much easier than measuring or eyeballing. Now I'm showing the other 2 master layout die sets because I will use those later, and they are really well designed to give you that die cut shape with a fine mat around it and also some other basic shapes. I've used these die sets in past videos, and I definitely will use them again in the future because I think it's good to have those basic shape die sets, and this has a lot to offer. Okay, so I'm taking those 2 large rectangle dies from the Master Layouts 1 set, and I'm taking the smaller of the 2 rectangle dies and using it to cut from our background. Notice I'm doing so from the left-hand corner of it so that I have that large area over on the side to save for a second card. You can see how nice this fits towards the center of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. But I still want to create the mat, so I'm taking the rectangle die that's slightly larger, and I cut that from black cardstock. I'll glue that behind our purple piece. Notice there's an area cut out of the center of the black. That's because I needed a black hello die cut that I'll use later, and I might as well cut it from the center because nobody's ever going to see it. That's one of the fun ways to really stretch your paper and use as much as you can. Okay, so now I can add this onto my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch top folding white note card. Okay, so I have my purple hello die cut where we added the shimmer to it, and I'm adding it to a shadow die cut that's from white cardstock. I'm gluing that right towards the bottom of the card. I also stamped Happy Spring onto a thin white cardstock strip with black ink, and I'm gluing that right below our hello die cut. Very simple design, but thanks to all the shimmer and layering that we have on our background, we don't need to add much to it. I really feel like that black mat, that fine black mat, also helps to make the card pop. The only other thing I added to the card were some silver baubles here and there, just for a bit of dimension. So you can see how we have the silver embossing at the center of the flowers, then lots of perfect pearl shine, and we have the text that kind of runs over it that we lifted off from the shimmery background. So much to look at, and this is one of those cards, again, when it's in your hands, it really looks magical. It's definitely a technique that is worth sharing. Now here's another card that's a very similar design. I just moved the hello to the bottom center and stamped Sweet Friend underneath it, and that's from the stamp set that's included in the kit. I also added silver baubles to this. But this time I used a gold shimmer cardstock instead of doing the gold perfect pearls on the die cut because I had the cardstock and it was a nice match. I really like the colors on this one. The white perfect pearl and the gold perfect pearl really look nice with any color cardstock. Okay, my next card and a few others in this video use a sentiment from the new Gina K Designs Go-To Greetings stamp set. I really like the style of these sentiments, and there are some unique sentiments such as "You made my day" and "Thank you for the smiles you bring to my face." On this next card, I'm just using the hello that's up there on the top right. I black heat embossed that onto a die cut circle, and I also stamped Sweet Friend underneath that. The Sweet Friend is from the kit that I showed you at the beginning of the video. I added that to our dark gray background that we created using perfect pearls and the lift technique. And then the last thing I did was add some purple pearls to the background. It just pulls the color out even more. Very simple design, but because of that fun layering background technique we did, it has a lot to offer. All right, now on our next card, I decided to alter the background a bit to make the big flowers stand out a little more. So this is the bright blue background I did, and it has dark blue pigment powder on the 3 large flowers. But I kind of felt like they got lost. They're hard to see, so I wanted to make them stand out more. So I'm using the coordinating die from the kit to cut out each of those blue flowers. I then will glue the rest of the background down onto a white rectangle. I again used the Master Layouts 1 die set so that I could use the 2 rectangles that are close in size. So I'm gluing this background onto the larger white rectangle, and it leaves us with those floral openings. Before I glue my flowers back into place, I'm going to glue additional white die cuts behind each of them. I put 3 behind each. That way those flowers stand up and stick out a bit, have some dimension to them, so that it makes those flowers stand out in our background. This technique is sometimes called an eclipse technique or a spotlight technique. I'll link to a video here on the top right of another way you can use this idea. It's a fun way to make elements of your background stand out against everything else. Since I used white die cuts behind the blue, and I stacked a few of them up, you'll see a white halo around our flowers when you tilt it, which helps to make it stand out. So you can see how it really makes those flowers more defined. So I added that onto a note card that I made out of Gina K's silver metallic cardstock. For the sentiment, I used the hello and sweet friend like I did on the last card, but I die cut a little banner from the Gina K Master Layouts 4 die set that I showed you earlier. It's got nice faux stitching on it, and I just tied a silver ribbon around the top. This allowed a lot of our background to show. You can see the white pigment ink we stamped on top and how our flowers are more defined because we use that spotlight die cutting technique. Here's a very simple one. This one I just added "You Made My Day," and I used the Gina K Master Layouts 2 die set to cut that rectangle and the mat that has the sentiment on it. I also added a silver ribbon and some white pearls to the background. You can see the subtle text background that we stamped with that light gray Gina K ink. Very subtle in the video, but you can see it in real life along with the shimmer from the perfect pearls. Here we have our black shimmer background. I again used the rectangle die to cut that and also to create a silver mat to go behind it. I glued that onto my white note card at an angle this time just for something a little different. And I used the hello die to die cut 3 times from white cardstock and glue that together for dimension so it would stand out. Now remember, from each of those large backgrounds that we created, I had a leftover border that I could use on other cards, and I thought I'd show you how I put those to use. Now this is from the purple background. I had a little purple border left over, and I used the coordinating dies to cut out the 2 large flowers, and then also the little leaves that are on this piece. I didn't want any of this to go to waste. You can see the original piece that I used on the card over there on the left. Now we're making a second. After I die cut as many large flowers and leaves as I could, I assembled them onto the top corner of a note card. This is a light gray note card that I stamped with light gray ink and that Simon Says Stamp Friendship background stamp. I also added some purple pearls and then have a banner that says hello and happy spring. So it's a very simple card, and I was able to use up the leftovers from the background we created earlier. Now for our other leftover border pieces, I decided to keep it very simple and just glue the border as is along the edge of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. I also added a thin strip of shiny silver cardstock to give it a little bit of definition. And then I heat embossed the "Thank you for the smiles you bring to my face" sentiment from the Go-To Greetings stamp set I showed you earlier. On this one, I decided to also add a silver heat embossed butterfly from the Gina K Beautiful Butterfly stamp set, which I'll show you in a few minutes. I also added a few black little gemstones to it. Very simple design, doesn't take long, and I'm just using leftovers. I used the same large sentiment on all of these because I like the sentiment and I like the size of it. On this one, I used a different butterfly from another older Gina K stamp set. This is Boho Flowers, which is definitely a favorite of mine. And I thought the style of this butterfly went nicely with our layered background. And our last border card here uses my favorite background. On this one, I added some white pearls, and I also added some flowers, little flower die cuts that I created from gold shimmer cardstock to match the background. When I am unsure what to add onto a card, I often reach for small flower die cuts because you can scatter them and position them wherever you want and kind of crowd around or center around your focal point or your sentiment. For this, I used the Simon Says Stamp Mini Flowers and Leaves dies. Okay, next I wanted to do 2 very quick examples that better demonstrate the perfect pearl lift technique. In this case, we're starting with an entire background of perfect pearls, and we'll lift a stamped image from it. So I'm starting with black cardstock, and I'm covering it generously with VersaMark ink. I'm again using an ink blending tool and just applying the ink all over it. I find it's easier to do this on this large piece than to press the ink pad onto it, but it's totally up to you. You just want to cover the entire surface. Next, we will add perfect pearls until you don't see the black anymore. Here I'm applying a blue kind of towards the bottom, and I blend it up a little bit, and then purple towards the top, and I blend it in the middle a bit. You can just overlap those and the blending will happen naturally. You don't really need to make much effort to do so. Once you're done, you can knock off the excess with your brush and then use a dry cloth to just once or twice gently rub over the surface. But before we do the stamping on that, I want to create a second background, again, making 2 cards at once. Starting with black cardstock, covering it generously with VersaMark ink, and this time I applied a copper pearl to one side and then a gold to the other, allowing them to overlap in the middle. I do again recommend for this technique to start with black cardstock or any really dark colored cardstock. Now the stamps I'm using for the lifting technique are from Gina K. This is the Best of Luck stamp set. I thought that large daffodil image would be great for this. You can really use any stamp for this technique. I like the effects of using an outline or a detail stamp such as this one. Okay, now in my Misty stamping tool, I have that daffodil image. I'm inking it up with VersaMark ink and stamping it onto our perfect pearl background. Notice how it lifts some of the pearls away. I'll then clean my stamp and repeat the process just to intensify it a bit. Look how quick it was to create that shimmer background. All right, let's go do the lift technique on our purple and blue shimmer background. This time I'm using the new Gina K Magnificent Moths stamp set. I love the beautiful images in this and the sentiment that says, "May your big day be magnificent." So I'll use a few different images in here clustered together in my stamping tool. You can see how I just position them to cover the entire shimmer background. I'm being careful not to move my stamps because I don't want to disturb the pigment powder that's on there. We want them to stay still while we do this. Notice even my clean stamps picks up a little bit of that perfect pearl. Okay, now we're going to ink up our stamps generously with VersaMark ink and then stamp it down onto the perfect pearl background. When we open it back up, it'll lift some of the perfect pearl from our background, leaving the images visible. I only did it once this time and it still showed up beautifully. Okay, so now I'm spraying both of these backgrounds with my fixative and letting them dry. Then we can move on to assembling the cards. Here I used the Gina K Beautiful Butterfly stamp set to silver heat emboss a large butterfly on black cardstock, and I'm gluing that right at the center of our background. I did use the Master Layouts 1 die set to create the rectangle background piece and the black mat to go around it. I then added a sentiment, again from the little hello bundle or kit that I showed you at the beginning of this video. To finish it off, I added some iridescent gems to the background. Very simple card design, but it has so much shimmer to it that you don't need to add anything else. This is one of those techniques where a little goes a really long way into making a special card. So think about all the different stamps that you can use this lift technique on. And again, I think it works best with detail stamps. Here is our gold background. On this, I added "May your day be magnificent." I had actually changed that sentiment. The stamp says "May your big day be magnificent," but I cut out the word big and changed it to be "May your day be magnificent," so it could be used for any occasion. Really, I like to change up my sentiments to get the most out of them. So you can see very simple card design, just added black cardstock mats to make it pop a bit. Such a fun technique. Now before we go, I wanted to share one bonus card. The reason I'm sharing this is a very light and bright card, but it uses the same bundle that I used at the beginning for those dark shimmery backgrounds. I just wanted to show you the versatility that you can get from your products by just changing up the colors or the technique. So I used the same layering stencils and I just used blending brushes and bright ink to color them. I did as many colors of inks as I could on here so that it would look like a custom pattern paper when I was done. I then did a lot of the same tricks I showed you at the beginning of this video. I used the Hello die cut, and then I also created a black mat to go behind our inked background. The black really makes these colorful pieces pop. I highly recommend trying black as an accent if you've never done so. It works great for a mat and also for your sentiments. This time I used a black glossy cardstock, and I even used it for my white heat embossed sentiment underneath the Hello die cut. So this is a very bright and happy card, whereas the ones earlier had more of a classic or elegant feel to it. Again, just changing up your techniques can be a lot of fun, but also really change up the look of products that you have. Now, I used a layering stencil set today along with some stamps, but keep in mind that the techniques that I showed with the pigment powder can be done with any stamps, as I demonstrated with the moths and the daffodils. So look at what you've got. If you don't have perfect pearls, I encourage you to check them out because there are many things you can do with them. I will link again to some other ideas for perfect pearls at the end of this video. If you're interested in anything I've talked about, it's linked below in my YouTube description as always. And click over to my blog because I have information on how to get a free stamp set with certain purchases over at Gina K Designs. She has that great deal and I think it's worth checking out. All right, have a wonderful day. We'll see you again soon and take care.